Okay, I guess we're ready, huh?
Call the order, City Council meeting for January 6, 2015. Happy New Year's, everyone, and please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Christie, please call the roll.
Mr. Shar,
Aye.
Mr. Foster,
Here.
Mrs. Fritsch,
Here.
Mr. Grundon,
Here.
Mr. Kirkovich.
Sure.
Item 3, correction and/or approval of city council minutes for December 16th, 2014. Do I hear a motion for approval and/or change?
I'll move to approve them as
And the second, please.
I'll second it.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Foster,
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch,
Aye.
Mr. Grundon,
Aye.
Mr. Kirkovich,
aye.
Mr. Shar.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Correspondence, we'll start with Ed.
None.
Mike?
None?
Quiet.
Yeah, pretty quiet on my end, too.
Mine was quiet, too. We had a holiday season. Questions and public comment. Public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda unless the item is the subject of a public hearing. If your comments pertain to a public hearing, you are asked to hold your comments until the hearing. Public comments may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order. The state opens meeting law discourages action by the council on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes and state your name and address when addressing your comments and fill out the sign-in sheet provided. I went through all that. Nobody's coming up.
Katie Otto, 275 South Main Street and Lake Mills Main Street Director.
Kate Anderson, Lake Mills Area Chamber of Commerce.
We have looked over the documentation you have for the meeting tonight, and we just wanted to say that we think the lights that you're considering for South Main Street look fabulous. It's really nice to see a design that'll look great on our streets, very vintage looking. So we're really excited about this, and for downtown, we're hoping maybe you can get lights that are similar to what we already have around the park, sort of shorter, and keep that vintage look downtown.
Okay. Thank you.
Ditto. She has bronchitis.
Anyone else wishing to?
And thank you very much for considering cool vintage lights, too.
Thank you, Katie. Anyone else wishing to address the council? If not, we'll close questions and public comments and go to the city manager's report. Steve?
I provided two additional reports for tonight that are not on tonight's agenda. One's about the lead and copper program that is coming up, and we'll be talking about that. We'll probably have to have you authorize me to sign the consent order. And then a discussion item that we had during the budget session about building maintenance issues, and I have a proposal in there on that too. So those are items that will be coming forward or can come forward. Other than that, I don't have anything. Are there any questions?
So, just a clarification, the two reports that you mentioned that were on our desk tonight, are they going to be on future agendas?
One will,
Which one
the
will?
lead and copper one.
Okay,
The other one can be. That's something that has to be driven by one of the council members.
okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, item 7, council business, board and committee appointments. I have before me appointment application for Todd Temperley for the cable and TV board. You have a motion of acceptance of Todd Temperley to the
I'll make a
CAV.
motion to approve Todd Temperley to the CATV board.
And a second, please.
Second it.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Grundon?
Aye.
Mr. Kirkovich?
Aye.
Mr. Shar?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
I want to thank Todd for volunteering his time for this board. Mrs. Lanius licenses, I see none. That's correct, right? Is that right?
Correct. Can I ask a question, something that I think we kind of missed on the city manager's report? Were we going to have, Steve, were we going to have a statement of the election situation, or will that be coming up later in our agenda?
No, it should be done now. And there are two people running for the at-large position. One is Mike Foster, one is Kevin Lehner. And is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. It was open until 5 o'clock today.
Okay.
So there will be no primary in February. It'll go right to the April election.
Okay. Sir, thank you.
Item C, this is the discussion on preferred lighting fixtures on South Main Street. This is motion 15-1-1-1. Misty, could you read this motion, please? And then we'll, there are some blanks on here, and we'll fill those in after the discussion.
Motion 15-1-1-1, authorizing the city clerk to send this motion to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation regarding the city council's preference related to street lighting poles and electric fixtures for use on South Main Street. Be it moved by the City Council of the City of Lake Mills, Wisconsin as follows. Section 1, that city staff has prepared information for the council regarding the comparison of the streetlight poles and electric fixtures. And Section 2, that the council has reviewed the possible alternatives for streetlight poles and electric fixtures to be used as part of the South Main Street reconstruction. And Section 3, that the City Council has reviewed the information and approved blank pole style and blank electric fixtures for use in the WISDOT South Main Street project. And Section 4, the city clerk is authorized to send this motion to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation indicating the council's preference on streetlight poles and electric fixtures and to take such actions as necessary to incorporate blank pole style and blank electric fixtures in the construction of South Main Street.
And do we have a motion of adoption of 15-1-1-1?
Also move.
And a second, please?
I'll second.
And at this time, I'll turn it over to Diane. She's done a lot of research on this, so Diane, would you take it?
Thank you. Since the last meeting, actually since the Public Works Board meeting in December, I visited several cities that had this Park Ridge Barrington light pole fixture, pole style that was recommended by the Public Works Board. And the one that was originally in the Shullsburg area, that one is no longer available. So, but we then found it in Maple Bluff by Sternberg Lighting. And the light fixtures in Maple Bluff look very nice. I think they will be a definite asset to the city. They're very similar to what we talked about at our last meeting. They're full standing, I think we said 32 feet, is that right? Is that what we said? Well, anyway,
No, I think they're 23 feet.
or maybe I reversed my numbers, I like to do that. Okay, 23 feet. And they have, they extend over the street partway, and they have, well, the council has a picture of them that we received in our packet, and they do look exactly like the picture that we had. I think they will be a real asset. One thing I noticed is that the cities that have this kind of lighting, it's most effective when it's on alternating sides, like a zigzag, so that you have one here, and then you go a little bit farther, but it's on the other side, and then you go a little farther, it's on the other side. So it actually looks prettier, too, when you're coming in if the lights are, staggered down the street. And so I do have that in the motion that I'm going to make. The other thing that I found is that down in Schulzburg, where they have the lights that are almost the same, they do not use the tall ones in the very downtown area. They use the kind of lights we have in the park downtown, the...
Pedestrian.
The 13-footers?
Yeah, and they're called, where are my notes here? Pedestrian poles.
Pedestrian scale poles, yeah.
They go up from the bottom and not hanging over. So what I am recommending, and I think it'll look the best for the downtown, and part of what our Main Street and Chamber of Commerce speakers tonight were discussing, is that we want to keep that vintage look in the downtown. And so since we've got the ground open there, it'd be a good time to do that piece. Talked with Steve and Paul, and both of them said that is a doable thing. So I would, well, if there is no other discussion, I do have a motion to make.
Okay, why don't you guide us through that?
Okay. In Section 3, where the blank is, would go the Park Ridge / Barrington, which is the name of the pole. Then they have pole style and blank. In the blank would be LED mid-range. And the reason we're doing LED mid-range is because we don't want that really bright light that kills your eyes and makes it look like we're on Las Vegas or something. So the mid-range will give us a little softer LED light. And then at the, and by the way, should we add, I didn't know, Steve, should I put, is it enough to say the Park Ridge Barrington, or should we add on there by Sternberg? I could do that after the word style, pole style by Sternberg.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, just so that they're clear what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so if, which of you is doing the minutes tonight? Is it Misty? Okay, so Misty, after pole style, would you add by Sternberg, Sternberg, and then an LED mid-range electric features for use in the Wisconsin Dots Main Street project? And then down in the next section, same thing again, to incorporate the Park Ridge / Barrington pole style by Sternberg, added in. And again, the same thing, LED mid-range electric fixtures, in the construction of Main Street. And then on there, just so that the state knows what we're talking, what we want, to be placed alternately south of Veterans Lane. So the lights going down from Veterans Lane at the fire department down to Topol's will be alternating lighting from side to side. That's not all on there, just to be placed alternately south of Veterans Lane, period. And then in addition, we designate pedestrian poles similar to those in Commons Park, to be placed in the DB district, which is Downtown Business District, in Lake Mills, between Madison and Veterans Lane.
Any discussion?
I have some questions.
Okay.
Doing the zigzag, Steve, is that going to be a considerable cost addition? Because you're not running electrical on one side, you're running back and forth with electrical, or you got to run it both sides? Or will it already be there anyway?
Well, in most of the area, it's in the backyards right now. So they would probably run it out of the backyard and then string a couple together on each side. So it shouldn't be a significant additional cost in alternating sides. Until you start getting down to the south side where the street lighting is next to the street on the west side. But at that point, it's so close to the street, it may not be an issue. The additional conduit and line shouldn't be a substantial cost, and the base and other fittings are the same whether it's on one side or the other.
And if you remember the conversation we had a few years back, we were talking about replacing all the lights in the park, and then did we end up, is it LED that's in there now?
One of them had an LED. I don't know if it still does.
Okay, because we had talked about needing to take out, well, you'd brought before the council that we needed to take it all out and get rid of it, and then we had a healthy discussion, and from that discussion, it came out that we found out information that we could swap out the bulb fixture, the gut work, and be able to go with LED lights in the park without destroying the pole, we're having to replace the existing poles and stuff.
Yes.
So we don't have an intent to replace the poles in the park at this time?
No, we do not.
Okay.
The problem we have with the poles in the park is that they don't make them anymore, which is always an issue with these specialty designed poles. And so when you get out a certain distance, then you go from $3,000 a pole to $6,000 a pole, or in the case in the park, which is a 13-footer, you go from $1,500 a pole to $2,500 a pole. So that's always an issue when you're there, so you try and make sure that you are getting a pole that should have enough additional people buying it, that the price stays in a relatively reasonable range. The other issue, when we originally looked, there weren't any LED heads. They then came in with LED heads, but we were also looking at getting downcast because our code requires that we have dark skies. Well, now they have a fitting that you can put in those that creates a downcast rather than it puts something in the top. But then the issue was, it was so bright blue, that basic, but now they've created a system where they have a range of lighting within that LED. The most efficient is the bright blue. You're going to save the most dollars on annual lighting costs on the bright blue, but you can tone that down if you're looking for a different color in certain areas.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I was just mentioned, I did have a discussion with Paul Hermanson regarding this, and we're not looking at doing anything immediately. We look at maybe in 2 years doing something with the pedestrian poles. We're going to have to do more hunting on that. But for the state, we have to do this.
Sure.
And we're not committing to a specific pole on those ones in the park.
The key issue for the state will be that 13-footers in a pedestrian style, you need more poles per block. And that's what they're going to then start to design, as the pedestals and everything. The taller the pole and the more you can spread the light out, the fewer poles you need per block. So if we went and you saw 3 poles per block, you may see 6 per block with pedestrian-style lighting. So that's what they'll be doing. They'll be doing that design, but the pedestrian-style lighting gives them the information they need to be able to move forward.
Sure. Well, I want to thank Diane for her legwork on this, and
I
her husband.
do have pictures on my phone for anybody who wants to see them after the meeting.
Misty, would you call the vote, please?
Does that need to be read? We haven't had it read, have we?
Yes.
I read the initial one with the blanks.
We have to vote on the amendment. Did we get a second?
No, I don't have a second on the amendment.
Second on
I'll
that,
second.
okay.
I think we're all
I
clear
think
on
we-
what,
And if there's a question, I can talk to you later about with this.
Mr. Grundon?
Aye.
Mr. Kirkovich?
Aye.
Mr. Shar?
aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Do we have to vote on the motion? Or was that the motion with the amendment?
That was the
That was the
amendment.
amendment.
Okay.
Mr. Kirkovich?
Aye.
Mr. Shar?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Grundon?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Item D, discussion and decision on class of 1964 request to display veterans wall plaque. This is motion 15-1-1-2. Misty, if you would read that, please.
City Council Motion 15-1-1-2, authorizing the location and installation of a memorial plaque in City Hall. Whereas the City Council of the City of Lake Mills, pursuant to authority conferred by statutes of the state of Wisconsin, has established certain standards and procedures for use of the City of Lake Mills municipal facilities. And whereas the City Council received a request from the class of 1964 to place a plaque honoring veterans within City Hall, and whereas the city manager and city staff have reviewed the proposed request and prepared information for the council's consideration, and whereas the City Council has reviewed the information submitted and has considered the information regarding the subject, be it therefore moved the 6th day of January 2015 by the City of Lake Mills Council that, Section 1, that the Facilities and Grounds Department is authorized to install a memorial plaque as directed by the council. Section 2, that the city manager is authorized to take such actions as necessary to implement and administer said location and installation. The City Council does hereby approve the location and installation of the memorial plaque in City Hall and authorizes the council president to sign the motion.
We have a motion of adoption for 15-1-1-2.
I'll move.
And a second, please.
I'll second it so we can talk about it.
And discussion, or,
I would think, the problem I have with it is, as much as that particular class sacrificed with their military service, for City Hall, I really think it should be a plaque for all servicemen and women from all the fields of the military, not just a single one. I do agree with the memo that we have, that it seems that it's more of a school issue in that it's just one class.
Well, and one of the things I know we talk about at the Parks Department is, I mean, there's no policy in place, and does this fit, and then where does it go in the future? How many more are there, and are we prepared to, have a place for 50 or 75 of them, I guess is my concern. And you know what, I am a veteran. I want to see plaques, but I'm not sure opening this door
Yeah,
is right yet.
obviously I'm a veteran too. Rudy's a veteran.
Yeah, there's
Steve's a
3 of us up
veteran.
here. So.
But you're right, is this the right place? We'll end up as a community maintaining it and have the burden of putting the cost for maintenance, whether that's $1 or $10 over the lifetime. It's still something the community has to pay. And, yeah, I'm with Ed. There's been a lot of sacrifices over the years, and none bigger than, excuse me, the folks that went through the Vietnam era, which we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that City Hall is the right place. We do have places out in the park for this, and we may want to at least talk about it before we decide we're going to put it here in City Hall and a place that's not always open to people.
Well, I'll throw my 2 cents in.
What's the thought?
As a veteran from that era, and the sacrifices that were made by that class and the 22 veterans that served in the military during that time period, a very tumultuous time period, I might add. If you look at the cost of to hang a plaque in the city compared to the cost of what those individuals from the citizens from this city went through, it's not even an issue. Look around and I see lots of wall space and I see nothing on them. And I personally would be honored to see their plaque on a wall within City Hall. And I certainly thank those individuals that did that sacrifice during that time period.
My thought was that maybe City Hall isn't the best place. I was wondering if maybe, like outside the auditorium in the high school, where people go. I mean, yes, we have city council meetings, but look at how many people we have at these, whereas at the school, maybe somewhere between the cafeteria and the theater area, there could be a plaque put up there where a lot more people would see it than would see it here. That's my only thought.
And I guess I go back to that. I think it's a school type location, a school type, because it is a particular class. I lost a dear classmate of mine the year after he graduated from high school in the Vietnam conflict, and I recognize, want to publicly recognize, that was a large number of our people who served out of that class, but I don't see it, unless it's honoring all, being a City Hall type.
And I don't disagree with that, but that's not what's before us, so there's
Well,
nothing.
where do you see it here? I mean, where do you want to hang it, or what are you thinking about in the building?
We got plenty of room.
Anywhere?
There's nothing much on the walls. And we're talking about a plaque. And so if every class that graduated that had veterans in a military conflict put a plaque on there, I think we'd still have plenty of room. It's a big building. Anything else?
See, I'm not opposed to it. I just think that there may be a better place for it. If we can't come up, well, you know what? At this point, you're right, that's not what's before us. What's before us is, do we want to put this in the City Hall? Is there a better place for it? Sure. Could we get it placed in there and then maybe we were setting a precedent?
I mean,
But still,
I look around and, just coming in today, we've got 2 plaques hanging right alongside that door that were advertisement from one of the companies here in town that was put in a magazine.
yeah, you're right.
We
And
didn't
not
have any
just,
problem with that, but now we got a problem with placing a plaque with the names of veterans that sacrificed, and some of them maybe even the ultimate sacrifice, that were citizens of this city. Not citizens of the high school, but citizens of this city. So
I guess the only difference with what I was thinking was we put the stuff in there for the Aztalan Lake Mills Historical Society. The only difference with that type of stuff downstairs, which is nice to have that down there, it's great that we have that down there, is we're not maintaining it. I don't see that being a big cost factor, maintaining something on the inside of a building. so I'll take that off the table. And with that being said, I don't have a problem with putting it in here. We are setting a precedent, and you're right, we do have a lot of empty walls, and, yeah, being one of those military men and women, I like seeing their names out there to be recognized. It's just, I don't think they're going to be as noticeable or as recognizable being here in City Hall than they would if we asked them to put it somewhere else.
But you know what? They'll be memorialized here at City Hall.
Sure.
Well, do we need to then, I mean, if we put the first one up, have something in place so that they're all at least uniform?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I guess if we're going to do something like this, I assume that the intent of the class is to honor the veterans from their class. But I agree that if we're going to honor the veterans, any veterans, we should honor all of the veterans of that war. And I don't think it should have to come from a class. I think if this is important enough to do, then why don't we as a city get that information? We have it from the VFW. We know who those people are, I believe. Why don't we put a plaque up in City Hall for all the veterans of the Vietnam War, which would include the ones from the class of 1964, and let the class of 1964 use their money for a different item. But I think I would be more in favor of doing that, be uniform, treat everybody equally and respectfully. That's just my feeling.
And I would support that. I mean, it's a cost to the city, but it doesn't even compare to the cost of the lives
No.
involved.
And, you know, I think they have a really good point. I don't have a problem with their point. My problem is it's piecemeal. And I think maybe it is time that we do something like this. And then if somebody else comes up and wants to do something for something else similar, we look at that too.
For World War II
Or whatever, Korean War, whatever. But I think that the idea that the class has brought forward is a worthy one, but I think it should be, and I think maybe the city should do it so we control what it looks like, and work with the VFW to make sure we don't leave anybody off.
Do we have a representative from the class of 64 present? No. Okay. Okay, well, and I don't disagree with that, Diane and Ed, but
It's not
before
the
us
other one.
is, you know, specific, and I guess if we don't have anything else, let's call the vote on this one. And then if you know, if you want to pursue that idea, then I'm sure you could work with the VFW and the
Do you want to
Legion.
vote on it tonight, or do you want to table it and go back to
Well, I think
the-
this item needs to be voted on tonight,
Yeah,
up or down.
Yeah, this,
But then maybe we can put it on a later agenda for a different approach of this.
yeah, so let's go ahead and let's vote this, and then we'll take it from there.
Mr. Shar?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
No.
Mrs. Fritsch?
No.
Mr. Grundon?
Tough call, but no.
Mr. Kirkovich?
Aye.
Motion failed 2-3.
Okay, so if representative from the class of 1964 would like to contact Mrs. Fritz about her idea, and maybe we can pursue that. That's okay. Thank you very much.
Do we have a contact person for this already?
I'll send you the email.
Okay, so maybe I can call that person.
Yeah, I think there's a telephone number on it.
Okay.
Okay, so that brings us to item E. This is discussion and decision on the wastewater system needs assessment report. This is motion 15-1-1-3. Misty, if you would, please.
City Council Motion 15-1-1-3, approving the wastewater system facilities report and authorizing the city manager to place on file for use in impact fee study. Be it moved by the City Council of the City of Lake Mills, Wisconsin as follows. Section 1, that the City of Lake Mills City Council has received and reviewed the Lake Mills Wastewater Facilities Assessment Report dated August 2014, a copy of which is attached hereto and made a part hereof. Section 2, that the City of Lake Mills City Council understands that by passing this motion, they are providing policy direction regarding an impact fee study. Section 3, that the city manager is authorized to use said document to take such actions as necessary to implement and administer said facilities. Section 4, that the city clerk is directed to file a copy of this motion as official city document. The city council has hereby approved the motion and authorizes the council president to sign the motion.
And do we have a motion for acceptance?
So moved.
And second. And Steve, if I understand this right, that this will be the basis for adjusting the impact fees and not necessarily the user fees. Is that correct?
Well, you have to kind of, it doesn't affect the rate.
Right,
It affects the impact fees.
right.
And then there's another fee sometimes called the user fees or connection fees. We don't charge those.
Right.
In this case, what this does is defines a basis for the types of facilities that will have to be expanded in the future based on the estimated population growth, and then assigns fees to that group that's forcing the increase.
Right.
And so it combines with the rates to be able to provide the dollars needed to be able to keep up with the infrastructure.
And how, I know that we refunded impact fees recently,
And we will again.
and we will again, but how is this related?
Well, you have a certain time window that you're allowed to collect in. And we've been basically able to, through system improvements, reduce the amount of flows to the wastewater treatment plant. That being said, there are certain, eventually, growth will overtake that and we'll have to expand. So we want to continue to collect impact fees so that at some point in time, they will pay for those facilities. But the people who've been here a certain amount of time, they've been here long enough, they don't need to, they get their impact fees back. So last year, we did a 2-year rebate. So this year, we won't have any, but next year, there'll be another one. And we could continue that for a while until we actually hit a point where we have the need. But this keeps us in line with being able to have enough dollars on hand to be able to make those improvements when they're needed.
So those improvements are for the additional customers that would eventually be put on the line, and that the rate would not necessarily change for the current users.
This report doesn't affect the current users.
Okay,
By law, there's a certain amount that's assigned to the existing users and a certain amount that can be assigned to new residents or new growth, so a new home or something along
Right.
that line. So it wouldn't mean that there wouldn't be rate increases related to the public improvement, but it would significantly reduce the rate in comparison to what it would be if you had to assign all the public improvements to the rate.
sure. Okay, any questions? I haven't asked already.
I have a question. On page 9, there's, talks about South Main Street Interceptor. Is that at all affected by our South Main Street program in the future?
Yes.
And since I have not a good knowledge of this, does what we have in this report take into consideration what's going to be done, or is it only what is currently does this speak to only what's currently being done?
No.
Okay.
This looks at what the potential would be. The way it's set up is actually, if South Main Street weren't reconstructed, this probably wouldn't be an option.
Oh, okay, so they are taking that into consideration.
Yes, there's certain features of where the lift stations go and how they're designed that if we construct the new sanitary sewer to the size and depth that's possible, we could relocate some of those force mains and reduce some of our double dipping is, I guess, what we'll call it, where one pump station pumps to another one, and so then that has to pump not only what's in this region, but what was in that other. So we get off that daisy chain and we can get it directly into a gravity flow that reduces our maintenance expenses and our electricity and all that type of stuff. And we have taken all that into consideration with the South Main Street project.
Okay. Good.
Anything else? Go ahead, call the roll.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Grundon?
Aye.
Mr. Kirkovich?
Aye.
Mr. Shar?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay, item F, discussion decision on the dam construction design. Is there a motion on this one?
No, there is not.
Or just a discussion? And we have the dam guy here.
I'm glad you called him that.
Damn guy.
Yeah. I can tell you that it's nice to finally have a drawing in hand, as limited as it is. I'm hoping that Warren can take us through and give us a good idea of what this is telling us. So, Warren?
Indeed, I can. I realize you've only had this package in front of you for, I don't know, half hour or so at this point, but it is fresh off the press. It's a plan set that consists of 4 sheets, and I'll quickly walk through it, but the main emphasis is going to be on the last 2 sheets. But so if everybody has that in front of them, I've also got a couple poster boards I'm going to leave behind today that has a larger plot of the third sheet of the plan set in some color so that members of the public could have a chance to see that as well. The very first sheet in your plan set, though, is the base mapping that was developed from the survey that was conducted out there.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Is it easier just to point
Yeah,
out?
it's easier just to point, and I'm going to try and get to the bigger screen.
So page 1 is the current?
Page 1 is,
situation?
yes, the current existing conditions out there as they were surveyed in, I believe, yes, it was November 11th. So that really gives us a good handle on the dimensions and elevations as conditions exist today. Not a lot of need to go into a lot of detail there. The next sheet that you have shows, again, the existing conditions, but highlights areas that would be removed in the concept that we'll discuss on the next sheet. So again, this is a sort of a zoomed-in view of what you had on your first sheet there, showing that the existing 48-inch diameter metal pipe that comes out of the inlet structure would be removed as part of the proposed conceptual design, as well as the existing intake structure, the concrete intake structure with the wing walls would be removed as well. So I want to then move to the third sheet in the plan set, and we'll spend a fair amount of time walking through this. What we have here is a plan view of the proposed concept as it exists now, and I'll start to really walk you through it from the upstream. So we'll start in the mill pond, and we'll work our way east toward Main Street. Just to begin with, yeah, where Steve's pointing at the inlet there, what is called for is to, as we talked about on the previous sheet, to remove the existing concrete wing walls that are there and build new concrete wing walls that are parts of a entirely new intake structure. The intake structure will be of a similar size to that is out there now. However, instead of having a stop log arrangement, these timber boards that the city staff needs to pull and replace in order to help maintain the water levels in the lake, we're proposing to install a metal gate, a stainless steel gate that is bisected horizontally such that the gate can be lowered to allow water to spill over the top of the gate, or in the event that there's a need to pass a greater discharge, the gate can be raised vertically and removed entirely from the water to allow free discharge out of the mill pond and downstream. Some of the other features that we see there are an electrical control panel. It would be, again, an electrical panel that's in a stainless steel enclosure mounted adjacent to the northernmost wing wall. And that would really contain the brains, if you will, of the gate control system. We're proposing a system that has a water level sensor that will sense the water level in the mill pond and open and close the split leaf gate as necessary to basically achieve the target water surface elevations that are mandated by the DNR for the different seasons. So, again, an improvement over your current situation where you have to manually add or remove stop logs. By now, we have a fully automated system that senses the water level elevation, and then through a programmable logic controller knows that either the gate needs to be lowered slightly from the top to allow more discharge out, or raised and allow more discharge to be withheld. Also, close to the intake structure, we're proposing probably a light pole on which we could mount a light and also mount a security camera, just to basically have a means of keeping an eye on the site remotely, and also to help dissuade vandalism at the site. I understand there's some issues with the relatively elementary system that we have now, and that vandals do like to put glue in the locks to the stop log grate. And obviously, we're going to have a little bit more sophisticated system here, and I'd like to, probably some posted warnings that, it's probably not in your best interest to mess around with this because you're on camera.
Will there be motion detectors there, too?
Wasn't thinking about that. I mean, you could have a light that, I was thinking just a sort of a security light that would be on a timer system.
I think it'd be better to do it on motion detector, because then people who are tempted to do it might go, but once the light comes on, it might go, oh, gee, maybe I'll think about this again.
We have a lot of people fishing there, too.
Okay.
Yeah, these are details that can be worked out, but the thought is that we're not going to enclose the gate structure, or the controls will be in a locked stainless steel cabinet, but the actual leaf gate itself, which is going to be electrically actuated, so there will be an electric line that runs to it, and with the electric power is what is used to move the gate up and down. That we're not going to have that within a separate fenced enclosure, that we really like to keep that just exposed for aesthetics and for also just ease of access. And there is some concern that, of vandalism of that system, so that's why we wanted to incorporate some means of dissuading that. But again, we're kind of getting off into the weeds a little bit there. Moving downstream from the intake structure, the flow will then pass into a box culvert structure, which you see there is the parallel lines, and what that is it's a concrete box culvert that is 5 feet across, 5 feet wide, and 4 feet tall. That box culvert is going to be buried in the ground, much like the existing 48-inch steel pipe is today. So you won't see that box culvert. There'll be grass, again, covering the top there. That box culvert is 70 feet long, and again, we would then be able to maintain the access from the accessible parking spaces along Veterans Lane there with the sidewalk that then moves, or that proceeds to the north to the Legion building. We wanted to bury that flow in the box culvert there to basically to save money and to also make it easier to get that access across the flow over to the Legion by having just a sidewalk as opposed to having to construct a small bridge.
So that would be undercover. There won't be open water there.
There will not be open water. There won't be open water until you get to this area right here,
Right.
where the box culvert ends. And at that point, much like it was in the past, you'll then have an exposed end. Before you had the round steel pipe, this one's going to be basically a concrete rectangle. We can dress it up with some rocks around the outfall area. But there, the box culvert will daylight, and then from where the box culvert daylights all the way over to the first manhole. There's 2 manholes out there. If you just walk out there, you'll see 2 manholes. One of those, the one that's closer to the street, located right here, is a large or a cast-in-place concrete junction structure that was constructed to tie all the plumbing together when that area was filled in almost 2 years ago. There's another manhole upstream of that connects where the old pipe used to outfall into another pipe that joins into the other junction structure. So you've got the first manhole here, you've got the second manhole over here. Part of our motivation in this concept was that we wanted to expose the stream. We understand that the city had a desire to, again, see the free-flowing water, to open it up, to separate the dam structure from the roadway embankment. But we also wanted to approach this in a manner where we weren't going to cause a lot of impact to the relatively limited real estate that we have there, and also not drive up the cost by trying to undo a lot of the work that was just done 2 years ago in terms of building these 2 junction structures, the large one that's 8 foot by 12 foot, and then the one upstream of that, which is a 7-foot diameter manhole. So the concept that we have really leaves those existing manholes in place and ties into the upstream manhole. So as the water comes out of the box culvert, it moves to the east at a relatively flat slope, and then you can see the area where there's some large boulders. The water will then cascade down. It isn't a great vertical distance. We're probably talking on the order of 1 foot to 2 feet. So it's not like there's going to be a large waterfall there, but there will be enough of a fall such that most of the time there's not much water coming out of this culvert or out of this discharge point from the mill pond. So you will have an opportunity there for a little bit of a spill and a little bit of turbulence that then continues to flow now to the northwest, northeast, and then eventually joins another intake pipe, which then connects to the upstreammost manhole. Now what we're seeing in plan view here is something that really fits within the real estate on the Legion property there without going to extremes where it's going to start affecting the sidewalk on the south side or affecting some of the sidewalks around the Legion building. We also positioned things where we could save one of the three large trees that are out there. There's, if you know, there's two evergreen trees. I think they're spruce trees. Those would have to be removed as part of this, but on the lower southern portion of the bend, this area, we're proposing to preserve the tree that's there and the bench nearby it. And also, this design wouldn't affect the newly placed cannon pad on the north side of the property, up in this area. So what we've tried to do is open up the flow, but not consume any more real estate than necessary, and not try to drive up the cost by undoing a lot of the plumbing that was done 2 years ago as part of the emergency reconstruction. A few more details that aren't easy to discern from this view are that in this area where you do have the free-flowing stream, the cross-section is such that there's a 2-foot wide channel, and then it slopes up at 2 to 1, horizontal to vertical, and then out to where you see these sort of stronger sort of lines delineating the sides of the channel. And at that point, the slope of the banks becomes much steeper, and we'll talk about this a little bit on the next page, but the slope is much steeper there, where those walls would either be stacked stone, I'm talking large stacked stone, large limestone blocks, or alternatively, cast-in-place concrete walls that would have a form liner, much as you see on a lot of the newer highway bridges that you're seeing being constructed around the Madison area, where it looks like they've got this shape. Or even if you're up driving on 41 in Green Bay, you can see a lot of the new bridges and signs there have this, it's a brick form there, but what we would propose here would be likely something that would be, again, mimicking large limestone blocks, but made of cast-in-place concrete, and those blocks that formed that form liner finish, if you will, is then painted to resemble the natural stone color. At the head end, where you have the pipe that joins the manhole, we have it sloped at 4 to 1, so it is a walkable slope in this area over here. This entire area, really between the retaining walls, whether it's concrete or stacked stone, would be rip-wrapped, so this is going to be all covered in small rock on the order of like football or basketball sized rock that would line that lower channel. And then you'd have the stacked stone or concrete walls, and then there'd be a railing around the perimeter of the channel. Really, again, you can all along this perimeter here, we'd have a safety railing to protect against falling. The depth of this channel, or those retaining walls, is around 6 feet. So it's not, we didn't want to really lower it anymore, because if we start to get too deep, then we really start to eat up the real estate again, and then as it gets deeper, it really becomes difficult for people to actually see this channel from the sidewalk on Main Street, or even along the sidewalk along Veterans Lane there, because what you've now got essentially is just a deep trench. And we really wanted to look at this as an amenity, a visual amenity for the site there that can be enjoyed by the public, and not simply just opening it up for the sake of opening it up and separating the dam from the roadway. So let's go on to the next page.
Warren, would you like questions on this now or at the very end?
Let me go on to the next page, and then I'll open it up for questions. I just, again, the final page in your small plan set there shows a profile. Basically, as the flow would leave the mill pond, you can see you can see that the rectangle on the left side of the sheet there is that box culvert, that cast in place or precast box culvert that the water would flow through. It would leave the box culvert and then As I said, it would then cascade down this boulder field that we have there, and then flow along the open channel to a intake pipe that's at the eastern end of the intake channel, and that intake pipe then takes it to the existing manhole structure, and then the flow then enters the plumbing that exists there today, and that's what you see on the right side of this profile. But things to take away from this is you can see that we're not talking about a very deep drop. Again, our motivation for doing that is trying to fit it into the constraints that we have in the site there. If we go to a deeper drop, it becomes harder to see. It's going to require more land, and then in association with that, more excavation and construction, again, pushing up the cost. So I want you to focus a little bit now on the lower right-hand portion of that sheet. Down here. This shows a cross-section through that open channel area. So you can see that it's a trapezoidal-shaped channel. We've got a 2-foot wide channel at the bottom, and then the sloping sides that are covered in riprap, and then the retaining wall that I spoke of earlier that's either constructed of stacked stones or reinforced concrete with a form liner. And as you can see, as if we were to go deeper with that channel, then it becomes more of a narrow trench, and we either need to spread out the width of the opening, which eats into the available real estate, or conversely, we have to make those slopes steeper, and which really makes it really just a narrow trench and gets away from the idea of being a visual amenity. So those were just a quick overview of sort of what the concept is. I'd like to hear your feedback on that. Again, some of the things that we were guiding our concept was make it work within the site that you have, make it a visual amenity, affect the separation from the dam embankment and the roadway embankment, which, as we've talked about in previous meetings, would have potential consequences in lowering the hazard rating for the dam. And with the primary intent of when you authorized us to develop this design of improving the intake there, improving the inlet gate to make it an automated gate, a gate that can be operated without interaction from city staff on a daily basis. So, I hope that's been able to give you a brief overview here. I'd be happy to answer all the questions that you have.
Thanks, Warren, for being here, and a big thanks for, as we go through with this, I'm very impressed. As we said, and you kind of summarized, it opens it back up for aesthetics, which is the public wanted. And you've really, I think, addressed the issue here of the money is not a blank check. It's taxpayers paying for this, footing the bill, and it's just the citizens of Lake Mills, no one else fitting the bill for the whole region. And you've really kept a line on the costs, and I want to thank you for that. I have 3 questions. One, let's go to the box culvert. How is the proposal to clean out the box culvert if it comes impacted? Or is models like this rarely get impacted?
Impacted in terms of if...
Debris getting in there and causing it. I mean, you've got the dam structure, but if you're lowering it and things are coming over the top...
Right, so you're going to...
potential there of...
You're going to...
Of a dam within a dam.
Right, you're going to get, the floating sticks, the lily pads, the other things there. The thought is that periodically, the city staff would go out there and you'd flush this thing to really push that stuff through the box culvert into, basically send it downstream. That's really the operational scheme as it's envisioned right now. If you did get a stick that were stuck in there, it would be then a matter of having to go in from the upstream end. And
by closing the dam, you'd be able to...
Yeah, you'd be able...
The water flow for safety.
Right. We can't shut it off completely, but you would disable the gate, so to speak, and then be able to allow just the minimum flow to pass, and then at that time, allow somebody to walk up this box culvert
Okay, that's, leads me to the second question, and that is, we need to have a minimum flow for the constant water to go downstream due to our treatment plant being on the stream, among other things. But, so how, you haven't addressed that. How is that addressed in this design? I mean, the current one has a hole in it.
Correct.
How does this one work?
Well, you got, again, two options here. You could mimic what you do now with the, as you said, one of the lower boards on the dam has a hole in it such that the water's going through that hole at all times. You could do a similar thing with this split-leaf gate, such that we've got a hole at the bottom that allows, that acts as an orifice and allows it to discharge it all the time. I would think we could be a little more sophisticated than that, again, with the programming such that allowing a little bit of water over the top at all times to meet that minimum flow requirement. I mean, either one of those would satisfy the requirement if we had an orifice hole in the bottom of the gate, or if we decided, no, we're going to set up our programming, we can fine-tune our programming such that we're always going to let a little bit trickling by.
Okay. And then, thank you, and the last question then I have, you were talking about it working off of a sensor out in the mill pond. And of course, we have to lower and raise the water of the lake. Is that programmed then through the sophisticated sensor program? Well, then we'll say, okay, on such and such a date, we're lowering the water in the mill pond?
Yes, you can program it to do that, but this is also, we're also envisioning a system, and I didn't talk about this, that, you know, allows the city staff to, this would be tied into an internet web page, so that even if, depending how you want to set it up, I mean, the public could go on there and log in and say, okay, this is the lake, this is the level of the lake today, and see, you know, and this is how much flow is discharging from the lake today. But it would allow the city staff, again, we'd like to couple that with the camera, if you will, and be able to like bring up a page and say, oh, this is what the intake looks like right now, this is what the current water level is, this is how much flow is passing by, this is how far the gate is open or closed, and really provide an interface such you don't have to go out there and, you know, physically take a look at it unless you detect that there's an issue.
Thank you, Warren, for your work. Thank you, Mr. President.
And then on the slide gate, a quick question. They said, now, if you just want to let water flow, you lower the gate, correct? And you said if you wanted to like completely open it, it would go up?
Yeah, it's a, and
So is
I
there?
wish I had a good picture of it, but it's what's known as a split-leaf gate, so
Yeah.
you've got two halves, so you can lower.
It down or-
You can lower the top half and allow water to spill over the top, as a weir would.
So it's not like there's a frame sticking up then out of the top? I mean, it's the two splits just come up? Still-
There is a frame in the sides, because if you don't have enough capacity by what's able to spill over the top, and say we wanted to really just give it a quick flush to blow some of the sticks and debris and lily pads out of that box culvert, you could then raise the gate, and so that leaf that's typically on top that you lower comes up, and then there's a lip where it grabs onto the lower half and it then
Picks it
extracts
up.
the whole gate from the opening. So it allows you to pass water over the top or pass water
Underneath.
from the bottom as well.
I have a question. Actually, I have two questions. One is that as it is designed here, now you have a handrail, but that is not going to keep anybody out. It's more for people like me not to fall in, right? Isn't that, I mean, it's not going to be closed all the way down? or
Correct.
is-
It's
It would be
to,
along the edge?
it's to offer protection against
Right.
the fall over the steep grade change there of, 4 to 6 feet.
Now, if you have, let's say, a parent comes with their kid, or even kids after school, and it's a nice warm day in June, is there anything going to stop somebody from walking in there? And is that okay? Is it shallow enough that that won't be a problem?
It's shallow enough that I don't see that being a problem. As we've configured it now, yes, a person could you could walk right down to this little trickle of water there.
And I know some of the people in town are looking forward to that because they want to go with their kids and say, look at what, and maybe we'll find some minnows flying through or something, and that would give them the chance to do that, right?
Yes, it would. I mean, and now if the
Okay.
city decided, we don't like that, we would rather have, much like the old pit or bowl used to be, because there was, I believe, a 4-foot-high chain link fence that surrounded the perimeter. You could go back to a sort of a similar situation where it wouldn't allow people to walk right up to the water.
Now, could we use the chain link fence, the fence we had, can that still be put up along the roadside to
You're
prevent?
talking about the art.
Arts
The
Alliance
art-
fan.
the Arts Alliance.
That's coming back up.
That's-
That was always the intent.
That is, right?
Yeah, I already got notes.
But I think I'd like to clarify that for our home viewers and so forth. So the plan now is to put that back up along the road?
We're not that close to the road, so I'm going to
Okay,
work
well,
with
somewhere
it.
between the sidewalk
Yes,
and
it will be
this
around
thing.
there. We also have that little windmill type thing that we also have to figure out where we're going to locate back in there. So, yeah, I was going to work with Warren to try and see how we could,
Mm-hmm.
assuming maybe we'll need a little bit more of that type of fencing, though.
Well, and I think that's a good idea to have that. Number one, we have it, but number two, I think it's a good idea to have it there to prevent people from accidentally falling in that way, from the sidewalk. I mean, it's, people can horse
Quite a ways
around.
from the
Well-
sidewalk.
But
Pardon
it's,
It's not going to be like it was before.
No, it's not gonna-
Before, you
No.
stepped off the sidewalk and you went straight down. Now you're going to
Right.
have grassy area before you get to
But
the,
we're still
it's-
putting the fence up there, isn't that
Well,
the
you-
well,
area?
in the area,
Huh? We don't know for
somewhere
sure.
in the area.
Along these areas right here.
Okay, okay. On the sides.
that's where the,
The
that's where,
open spillway.
that's where the
Yes.
railing's proposed for, so, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you'd have to walk out onto the grass to get up to them, but you can see them from the whole area.
Along where the box comes and meets the spillway?
Where the channel, yes.
Where the channel, really along the sides of the
Both sides
channel.
of the channel and along where that box meets it.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yes? Okay, well, thank you, Warren.
Okay, well, I guess I know that Ed kind of indicated his feedback on the concept here. I guess I'd like to solicit any other feedback from the council. If somebody says, this looks like we're moving in the right direction, or this is awful, you need to go back to the drawing board, or if anybody has any other things they'd care to opine on.
No, I think you're going in the right direction. I like the shallow, I like the fact that it'll be an amenity, you can see it clearly, and I'm
Yeah, I agree.
definitely going the right way.
Can you show me on the map with your pen where the trees are that are being removed?
Yes, it's actually, if you go to page 2 in your plan set.
Right there.
So there's 2 trees right there, those are the evergreen trees. Those would come out, and then there's another tree, the smaller tree to the south that would be saved.
Right, so the two they're kind of smack in the middle of where we need the channel.
They're pretty much smack in the middle of where
Yep.
where the pipe goes right now. I don't know where we put them.
And talk to the Legion.
So what's the next step, Warren? Are you going to be making a pretty drawing?
A pretty drawing?
Yeah, I mean,
We-
not an architectural or engineering drawing, but a drawing.
But more of what you would think of as a rendering that would
a
show.
rendering, you know.
We can certainly do that. I mean, we talked about doing that, but I didn't want to really invest the money to do that until we understood that, yeah, we like what you're doing, or I didn't want to, get too far down the path and find out, well, okay, no, turn around and go back.
Well, my issue, the biggest issue that I have is to make sure that we separate the dam from the roadway, that we do get in a lower hazard. I think that, to me, is paramount. Everything else is just icing.
Okay.
Does this do that?
Well, there's no guarantee, right?
Guarantee.
It'll probably drop us to significant.
Right, let's be clear about that I think and based on the feedback we've received from the DNR, and we've had the DNR come talk at the council meetings and at the public information meetings, that really the best the city can probably hope for is to move from high hazard as it is today to significant hazard. You're not going to get to the low hazard as long as there's, buildings above the water there. And that's something the DNR isn't going to budge on. But this would allow you to, likely this separation would allow you then to move to a significant hazard. What benefit that has in terms of insurance premiums, I think some of the research the city has done is that it would be some benefit, but not nearly the benefit that you would affect if you were able to go to low hazard. And that's, unfortunately, that's just not the way the cookie crumbles on this one. Short of,
One thing I would think it does do, unless I'm wrong in my thinking here, I think one of the issues they had is that building then became part of the dam. Even though there's still water under it, it's no longer part of the dam.
correct.
So that might give us other options than trying to remove those buildings.
Well, and significant hazard just lowers the number of times it needs to be inspected.
It does
Could
help in
lower
that,
our
it does help in that respect.
It's not really,
Yeah.
but
It's correct. There is benefits not only in perhaps a lower insurance premium, but then the frequency inspection drops a little bit. Instead of having to be inspected every 2 years, it moves to every 3 to 4 years.
That was my understanding from the presentation from the DNR. So I certainly, as a council member, will hold them to it if they try to renege on it.
That they would be able to go to significant hazard?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I recollect as well. And based on, I think, the engineering arguments that can be made, that it should be a pretty solid case for significant hazard rating. But the next step in terms of, we can put together a pretty picture, or we can, march forward and actually, while we're putting together a pretty picture, start to really dig in and get a detailed design that, looks at some of the details of the box culvert, of the specific grading there, things like where exactly is the railing going to go.
Yeah,
We need to
that's more
remember,
important. Just let me clarify that pretty picture thing. That was just, I certainly don't want to put the city on tap for an additional expense to make a picture, so, but, the engineering is paramount at this juncture, so we can certainly move forward with a reasonable schedule for construction.
from the staff's, or from my perspective, bidding as early as possible obviously gives us the best bidding results. And so, we were kind of shooting for late February. We can still be able to make that. So we could get the design done and ready to start bidding. And
What's the shooting for, Steve? The approval, final approval to go to bid?
yeah, we'd want to be able to go to bid in late February, so second council meeting, have the drawings all done and say this is what's going out to bid. I know that we got until April.
Correct.
So if we didn't quite hit that deadline, but the earlier we bid, the better prices we're going to get, I'm sure.
And what's our construction timeline like?
Well, we want to be done by September 1st, right?
It could go beyond that.
Okay.
The DNR would really, they'd give you until the end of this calendar year.
Okay. I think the bidding date's more important than final completion
Yeah.
date.
Okay.
Typically before the contractors get a lot of jobs on their calendars. While they're still looking to fill their calendar early in the season, or early in the year rather, you typically have a little bit better pricing.
So I guess at this point, are we all on board?
I have one thing, that when we prepare I'm not sure the terminology here, but when you come up with what you want to put out there to bid on, I would ask that those sidewalls that are going to be precast concrete or something like that?
Would be cast in place.
Yeah.
If not rock, yeah, it would be something.
Right. I have seen some that are aesthetic, and I have seen some that are ugly. I'm asking you, please do not pick an ugly one.
Don't make an ugly one.
I want one that looks like a real rock wall, that has different shaped rocks and different whatever, and if it costs us an extra whatever, I think it's worth that, because otherwise this is going to look crappy.
Well, we'll get a chance to approve that
Some of that.
design.
Well, I know, but if it's done right to begin with, it saves money and time and everybody's effort, so that's just make it look
Okay,
good.
pretty rocks.
Understood, yeah.
Make it a good,
Picture, pretty rocks.
make it a good one, not a
Right.
crummy-looking one.
No, I understand you don't want just a regular blank concrete wall, and that's
Well,
why
not
we...
even regular blank, but I don't want one that looks like a beehive where everything is identical,
Right.
because it's obviously fake. But you can make them that they look pretty realistic, and that's what I'd like.
Okay.
So
Thank you,
we're all
Warren.
on board to move forward?
certainly-
That's what I'm hearing?
I've been on this council for a number of years now, and I've never been so impressed, Warren, as you're hitting what the council wanted, I think, and what the citizens were telling us they wanted. So thank you. And certainly, it's the right direction to go.
Okay, full speed ahead.
Okay.
Okay, next is item G. This is discussion on Browns Court design. Steve?
This was a request from Councilmember Frisch in relationship to being in her district and being one of the projects that's on this summer. I've got Brandon here prepared to discuss any issues on the project. I gave you a project map, which, from a location standpoint, here's Mulberry, here's Fargo, and this is Browns Court. There's an apartment building right here. We provided you with the base design drawings. I always love these. They tell me what I want to know, but nobody else cares. I know that. But there are, probably from your perspective, the street's really narrow. It's got all the utilities underneath the street. There's no stormwater. This is the worst possible combination of scenarios that you can possibly have, a dead-end street with a lot of housing at the end of it. No way to get the stormwater out, no way to get the people in and out. Water and sanitary are old. There's some water and sewer conflict. So the overall proposal is that we're going to try and get the street 2 feet wider. So we've been evaluating which side of the street will better take the extra 2 feet. But there are lots of issues out there, and so Brandon, if you want to go over anything, or if you have any questions you want to ask specifically.
Now, at the last time we talked about this, you said that we will be putting in some stormwater now with this project. Am I correct, or did I hear it wrong?
When we moved that $100 and some thousand from this year's budget to next year's budget, one of the primary items that we wanted to consider for that was the stormwater drainage in this area.
And
I
it's,
know that we've also won that Mulberry Street grant, and as part of that project, which we have to kind of develop an overall stormwater relief for the whole area. So this is kind of looking at all of that together. So I know that Brandon's been kind of working on a big charge and trying to figure out how to move the stormwater out of this area and trying to keep the cost within a relatively reasonable area while still being able to plan for significant future development. And because Grant Street and Birch Street in several areas and Prospect almost the whole way have no stormwater drainage.
right,
And so we have to figure out how to move that water from those areas through this area. So that's kind of an important overall issue in combination with this project.
Okay. And while this is being done, you had said that the residents will not be able to drive down this street, pretty much.
Yeah, at least for a significant portion of the project, they will not have access to the street, because on a street this narrow, when you're down digging sanitary sewer, the whole street's taken up. And so access in and out will be extremely difficult. Now, maybe we could get some access from a property owner off of Mulberry Street that had access through the back, or maybe off of Reed Street, but we've never done that on a project before, and probably would have significant cost impacts, so we have to kind of think about how that would tie in. But, yeah, this whole street could have days where they wouldn't have any access at all.
What months are you anticipating will be the heaviest construction months for this project?
If we get this out when we want to, and we see how the bids work, obviously we're doing Cook and Brown together.
Okay.
The contractor will probably look at it and make a choice on which one he wants to do first and which one he wants to do second. Now, generally, you do all your pipe work first. And generally, sanitary sewer is the first one, and then water main, and then storm sewer. And then you come in and do all your road-based work, and then your sidewalks. In this case, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they may look at doing, if we have significant off-site stormwater drainage for this, we talked about running all the way down to Fargo, down by the CP building, or over to Reed. They may opt to do that first and bring it to the site and then start separating out how they do that. So, but I think whichever part of the project they start on will probably start somewhere mid-May to mid-June, and they'll probably be done somewhere around first week in September to the third week in September.
So it's pretty much summer, period.
Yep.
Might not be the best summer to schedule your family reunion.
Well, at least in that area.
That's what I mean,
Yeah.
on that street.
Apartment buildings, people moving in and out, I mean, there's
gonna be
there's gonna
difficult.
be issues, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult.
If I may add, there is ability to kind of structure when the contractor can and can't work in certain areas in the contract if the council would like, to a reasonable degree, giving them a reasonable period of time to get the work done. But I think our goal was to advertise and bid this, hopefully at this month, at least advertising, open bids sometime in February, which would allow the project to start construction as early as possible, really, in the spring. So if that provides any benefit to schedules of any sort for either Cook or Browns, we could try to structure the contract to kind of force one area to be first or second or during a certain time period.
As is always the case, anytime you structure more into the contract, it costs you more.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah, and I think, as much as I emphasize with the people that are living in those areas, that they are going to be terribly inconvenienced, and there's no way really around that, but,
Term.
yeah,
It's
but
gotta be
the long term is going to be worth it, and as far as the city goes, I think that we should concentrate on being the most economical and still getting the job done without the burden of extra expense.
If we were looking at, some type of thing related to that, money better spent would be finding an alternate entrance than scheduling it, in my opinion. Because the scheduling, you're still going to have significant time periods where you're locked out. Let them build their own schedule and see if we can get an alternate entrance.
Yeah, I mean, all the people on South Main, we're going to be looking at the same, matter of fact, the whole city pretty much is going to be looking at the same inconvenience during that summer. So I guess, short-term pain for long-term gain.
The other issue that we want to know is remember, we're doing Madison Street too. And Cook and Madison and how you structure those can be a significant issue too.
Yeah.
Because you're going to want to have Cook done before school starts again. And then you want to have Cook done before you start Madison. And then you want to get Madison done as quickly as you can before school starts as possible.
Might be a good summer to take a vacation if you live on those streets too.
Yeah.
Just not be here for it.
Okay.
If I may solicit a little input from the council, as Steve had mentioned, one of the major concepts here is whether or not to widen the roadway. It is extremely narrow. Currently, parking is allowed on both sides. I believe there's no signage not allowing it on either side. Currently, it's 10.5-foot lanes, which is very narrow to have parking. We were proposing to widen it to 11.5-foot lanes, moving the south curb line south 2 feet. The reason for moving the south curb line was twofold. Rob Getz from the city did a tree evaluation about what trees he thought were in good shape, good species, and he would like to see stay. And the first one that's a large tree is on the north side of the road, and it's pretty close to the curb. So if you move that curb line, it would be difficult to keep the tree. And the second reason is that the driveways and the houses on the north side of the street are steeper than on the south side. So if you were to move the curb line closer to the house, it would make the curbs, the driveways even steeper. So that was kind of the rationale behind moving the south curb line only. But that said, the road could remain the same width, which is pretty narrow. If there's any input on that, that would be appreciated.
What's staff's recommendation at this point?
Well, we went along with the design.
That's the extra 2 feet. And what kind of, that's city property, right? We don't have to purchase anything? Now, the sidewalks are already in place, so they'll be
They'll be replaced at our cost.
at city's cost, and not at the homeowner's expense, which is good. I like that concept. So,
Cook's isn't quite the same.
yeah, well,
Cook's has got sidewalk on one side and not the other.
okay, well. At least we got half.
When do the letters go out to residents to tell them that this is happening?
Gotta have dates.
Generally, after we have our construction
Gotta have dates.
pre-con.
A month. What month would that probably be?
Generally, it's early April.
Okay.
So how's this council feel about widening the road? Are they in agreement with staff's recommendation?
Well, we have had reported problems on the road due to people backing out of driveways and hitting cars on the other side and not being able to negotiate around in there. So I guess I would think 2 feet might be a good idea.
Could we review the parking on that again? Is there parking on both sides?
On both sides, there's no parking restrictions on that street at all, and so,
And if you remove parking on one side, would you then be able to do it without widening it?
no,
And achieve a safer environment?
the issue, and she brought up was a good issue, is that if you're coming out of this driveway, let's say you just have parking on one side, and you're coming out of this, you still don't have enough room to negotiate certain types of vehicles, which was a truck, out and get out without hitting that car. So that's a lot of times has been a problem, is the street's so narrow that when you park there, whatever side is the opposite of the driveway is going to be a problem.
Another thing that I've observed being out there as part of this project is that apartment complex does generate a decent amount of traffic, and if you have parking on one side and you get opposing vehicles, I mean, it's a temporary inconvenience, but I did watch it happen more often than I would have thought when we were out.
Is there the next question then would be, looking at all the possibilities, you got widening it, you got and parking on both or one side, and you've got the one side parking, not widening it. You also could look at no parking. Is there a lot of residential parking along that street, there is.
Yeah, that's part of my ward, and,
Yeah.
yeah, we do have a lot of
So that's not a good
residential park.
alternative, then.
Well, the people there aren't going to be happy if you take away the parking.
And then that also might make a faster speed from the apartment building down to the street once you take away the parking.
Do we have a lot of roads that are that size or similar, or is this one of very, very few that are?
It's a very rare situation for
So
the
we
city.
would
to-
basically just be taking it up to standard
Yeah,
of what the rest of our roads are, or at least closer to?
Closer to. We're making the street almost drivable based on the standard of what cars are now today. When you have the turning movements that you have to have in and out of driveways and the widths and then parking, it's very difficult on a really narrow street. Our streets now, this is 28 feet back of curb to back of curb?
Existing now is 25.
25 feet, okay. So that, I don't know that there's another, Water Street is 28. Our standard is 34. So you can see even 2 feet, we're way below normal, and
And
still get a lot of complaints about Water Street being too narrow.
Yeah, well, in the grand scheme of things, it won't add that much more to that road to keep it maintained in the future years just by adding that few feet. I don't see any reason why not to do it. Even if we did want to come back and limit parking later, you could always still look at that, but, yeah.
Basically now with the size of the equipment, you're almost overlapping.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you for getting this to us. Appreciate that.
so is that enough direction, or?
I
Yeah,
think I'm
we're
the
good.
one who asked for it, so he wasn't asking for anything.
One final thing, if I could, and if we're looking at bringing this back on the second week of February, second council meeting, third week of February, second council meeting for,
This design,
yeah.
we don't usually bring back these
What we're talking
designs.
about for the bids.
Yes.
Okay,
That would be
so-
the first meeting in March.
March or April?
Well, you said,
We're going to try
March,
and bid it
April.
in late February,
oh, okay.
and then the first council meeting after that, we generally bring it to the council. So
If-
I'm assuming first meeting in March.
Okay, I'm just going back to a question that Diane asked, and that was when homeowners would get notification. And if they're going to start it in mid-April, and we know we're going to be doing it because we put out bids by the end of February, then I would just like to see in March that letters go out to the people. So mid-March or somewhere in that third week of March, so they do have more than just 2 weeks' notice that we're going to tear up the street.
That wasn't quite what we said, Ed. We award the bid, and then we have a pre-con where we meet with the contractor and we discuss the construction issues. And then he generally gives us a schedule, a preliminary schedule. And we use that schedule to provide notice, and actually, he's required to provide notice. So generally, he wants to sit down, have the meeting, and then go
Okay,
through
I
the
guess
process.
in that it's going to be blocking the street, that, I guess, as a council member, my direction is that we need to be staying on top of it, not just letting the contractor do it, because we've had issues over the past few years where the contractor was supposed to, like the issue with no water at the hairstyling salon type thing. Well, the contractor was supposed to notify, but he didn't notify, and supposedly, and, you know, he said this, and you said that, and I said that, and so I think we need to stay on top of this issue a little better and make sure that notification is out there, even if it requires the city doing it rather than the,
No, I'll volunteer and do the first one. People on Browns Court, you're in for a rough summer, sorry.
so, that's all, but.
Can I have a question on the diagram. Why is there that dotted line that in that first house on the south side goes all the way up to the house, and then the dotted line goes around? What is that?
The dotted line represents what we call the slope intercept, so where our grading behind the sidewalk would match the existing ground in the people's.
So they have a hill that goes right up to their house on
Cor-
that.
Correct.
on that
And
one.
generally, it goes farther behind the sidewalk where for whatever reason, the sidewalk is going to be kind of lower than the existing ground, or you're kind of improving, I mean, that would be my opinion, improving the situation of people's yards where, oftentimes you'll see they'll have kind of a flatter yard and then it'll drop 2 feet down to the sidewalk. Whereas you could grade back at a fairly nice slope, a decent ways into their yard. And I guess that might be somewhat of a preference on the homeowner, but
Well, especially if they have perennials planted in that area.
Well, let's,
Okay.
let's move on and
Yep.
let's go to item H. This is ordinance 1144. This is a disorderly conduct with a motor vehicle ordinance. This is the second reading. Let's see, would you just read the title?
Ordinance 1144, disorderly conduct with a motor vehicle.
And I see the chiefs here that... The floor is yours, chief.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity, I guess, to discuss this. From what I understand, in the meeting, the directors' meeting that we had this morning, there was some questions about this particular ordinance. So what I decided to do was put something together just a little bit to give council kind of an overview of what I was thinking about when I went to Vicki and we discussed putting this ordinance together. The DC with the motor vehicle, basically the reason behind my request to do this is I have worked in jurisdiction before that did have this, and it was a real good tool for the police officers. Basically, it allows us to more accurately and reasonably address certain problems with driving behaviors that are occurring within our jurisdiction. The behavior that we're seeing out there, I mean, a lot of this is kind of extenuating from some of the issues that we were having over at Bartles Beach, as well as over in the industrial park, and groups of individuals that have been congregating within the city and driving recklessly and on a lot of occasions. Basically, as a law enforcement officer, what the officers have to draw from is the Wisconsin motor vehicle laws, and then also the city ordinances. And one of the problems that we see is that, there's several issues with it, but what I've seen over time in working at agencies where we've had this particular ordinance and other agencies where we didn't have it, is what officers tend to do is try to find something that kind of fits the mold for certain driving behavior that isn't really defined in those other two sources, unless we were to adopt something like this in our ordinances. A good example is squealing tires. We don't have a squealing tire ordinance, and in the state motor laws, there really is nothing that specifically defines the squealing of tires by a motor vehicle. So what we'll do, or what an officer will do in a lot of cases, is with the Wisconsin motor vehicle law, the statutes, they'll take a look at that and possibly write them a citation or an individual citation for unreasonable and imprudent speed, which in essence is considered not maintaining control of your vehicle. And that when we do that, and no different than here what the officers have been doing of using the ordinance of loud and unnecessary noise. But when we take a look at it, I think either one of those really don't address the entire problem. If we're looking at failing to have a vehicle under control, we're just trying to find something that the officer feels may fit the best option that they have to apply to that particular violation. The person could perfectly, have that vehicle under control and still squeal those tires. So if anybody ever really wanted to push that, I guess, in court, in the line of defense, that's kind of an arguable concept. It's no different than loud and unnecessary noise. If somebody's squealing their tires, it could be subjective regarding, was it really loud? And we're not necessarily, I mean, we're concerned about the noise, but we're also concerned about the action itself in that particular case, being the unsafe act of accelerating fast enough that you're squealing the tires, you're making the noise, and there's a great potential that you could lose control of the vehicle and hurt somebody. Another problem that we see is with the state motor vehicle laws is that they're pretty limited. Under Wisconsin statute, in order to enforce a motor vehicle law, with exception to an OWI, a hit and run or reckless driving, those laws only apply to the right-of-way, the public right-of-way, the streets. And when those laws, if you try to apply those in, say, like a parking lot of one of our beaches or our parks, that is actually, it's considered public property, but yet it's not a public right-of-way like a street is. So we're not able to enforce, if somebody were to go into one of our parks and start to squeal their tires, unless it rises to the level of being reckless, we really don't have, we're not able to issue a citation for that unless we go back to our loud and unnecessary noise ordinance that's available. We also run into this problem with not just our public parking lots, like our city hall, school, city schools, and some of the other places that the city is responsible for, but that it doesn't quite constitute the right-of-way as a street does. We also consider the private parking lots, like businesses, churches, clinics. They are private parking lots, but they're open to the public. So one of the problems that we have there as well is that we're kind of restricted to what we can do from a law enforcement standpoint. We can enforce ordinances in there, but we're not really able to enforce any Wisconsin motor vehicle laws in there unless it is reckless OWI or hit and run. So, a good example would be if we had somebody in the public high school parking lot and they're doing Cheerios with their car. If there is nobody in the near vicinity that is in any sort of danger, there's not much we could, there really isn't a whole lot that we can do. We can't really justify a reckless driving if it's just one person driving a vehicle and they're driving like that within a parking lot such as the high school. So that is, just a, simplified example of that. The examples of some of the driving conduct that we've been seeing too, around downtown, it consists of squealing tires, some Cheerios, some brake stands, which, with that terminology, basically what a brake stand is, if an individual stands on the brakes and accelerates real quickly and they squeal the tires, and you got the noise and you got the smoke and all that stuff coming out. Tranny drops, some of these kids that are driving around, down and around our city, around Bartles Beach, are doing tranny drops. They're driving through leaf piles, motorcycle wheelies, and unlawful use of the horn and racing are just some ideas of what would constitute DC with a motor vehicle. Some of the conduct that we've dealt with, even just recently, we had an individual that was doing a tranny drop maneuver down by Bartles Beach, and there were people in the area, but the people were not close enough to constitute a reckless driving. Even though he was on the right-of-way on the street, he reversed real quickly and then put the vehicle in drive and went forward, squealed his tires, and created a disturbance. There were people in the park. One particular individual got upset, came over, and that individual ended up becoming disorderly because he was so upset about the conduct that this kid was doing with his vehicle. What we ended up issuing is citations for disorderly conduct in general, because we didn't have a vehicle disorderly conduct-related ordinance in effect. The driving on public grounds is another problem that we have. Wallace Park, that everybody's probably familiar with, the damage that was done over there. Some of the individuals that we've been dealing with and trying to get under control, and dealing with some of the things that they've been doing in the park, but then also now it's moving out onto the streets. They drove through, a couple of them drove through Wallace Park, did some extensive damage to the grass, damaged a sign in there, and with that particular situation, again, we're back into where it is public property, yet we're really not able to charge reckless driving since it's off a right-of-way, and they are in this, now this grassy area. We're not able to, OWI, hit and run, and reckless driving really doesn't apply in that particular circumstance unless we were to have an individual other than the driver that was within the vicinity and that may be in significant danger. We had an unlawful use of the horn situation over by the golf course, one of the tees off of Pinnacle Drive, I believe it was, where we had a couple individuals that were in their vehicle and thought it would be fun when people were trying to drive their golf balls to sit and make noise by beeping their horns and that sort of conduct, which created quite a disturbance from what I understand. We had some racing going on this last summer down in the industrial park. Squealing tires coming out of the high school is a situation that we've dealt with recently. Excessive acceleration is another driving behavior that we've dealt with over on Lake Street, and I've seen that a couple times. Unfortunately, off duty and not able to get somebody over to get the individual, but it's basically when you have somebody that is stopped at a stop sign, decide that they're going to go ahead and just step on the gas real quickly and just take off, intentionally staying within the speed limit, but just that real aggressive initial takeoff from those intersections, which could cause a vehicle to go out of control and cause an accident. Driving through leaf piles, I haven't seen that, but I have heard from the officers that has been something that has occurred here, I guess, in the past. And from what I understand, we don't have leaf piles, or that's not legal to rake the leaves into the street anymore in the fall. But apparently it's still, I believe it does still occur, for those individuals that, I guess decide that they are going to sweep or put the leaves in on the curbside. So basically what we're looking at is the request of council to consider adopting the ordinance of disorderly conduct with motor vehicles so that the officers have a more effective, more, I guess, acceptable, accurate tool to use out there to address some of these issues that otherwise, I think we're putting ourselves a little bit at risk, especially from a prosecution standpoint, because we're plugging in what we have available to us, but it doesn't necessarily address the violation as good as, I guess, DC with a motor vehicle could.
Question, is the way this is written because, Vicki, I guess is addressing you with this question, the city municipal code, does that give officers jurisdiction to issue these in parking lots? That would be, it could be the Century Business type parking lot, it could be in Bartles Beach, that would be a park type lot, or it could be, wherever. School.
It could be any place. The restrictions that we have with the motor vehicle code, the chief already addressed that it's certain parking lots and right-of-ways, but
I
it
guess,
doesn't
how
always
does this,
fit.
is it because it's in the municipal city code? My question is, how does this allow for enforcement in this within the boundaries of the city of Lake Mills?
Basically, any place, whether it's public property or private property where there's a motor vehicle involved, if it meets the elements of any of these paragraphs, it could be cited.
Because it's in our code? Because it doesn't
Yeah.
say that in our title.
Yeah, because,
Says ordinance.
yeah, this would be plugged right into section, Title V, which is where we have a number of municipal ordinances that the police department cites for, whereas all the traffic laws are in Title VI.
Okay. That was, because I was confused on how, you could do this on the street, but how would it carry over into non-street areas?
Yeah, I can
Because
see.
it's in the code, the municipal code?
Right. I can see that there's a lot of value to this ordinance, because when I have somebody pleading not guilty for, say, loud and unnecessary noise because they squeal their tires, and they want me to go to trial on it, and I'm hearing from them, well, I didn't do it on purpose, and all it was I had a problem with my car, and it chirped a little bit, and then the cops pulled me over and they wrote me for this. It wasn't loud, it wasn't unnecessary, it wasn't anything I could control because of some mechanical thing. This would be a perfect thing I could amend it to. Then they would still accept consequences, and they would feel like the conduct fit what they were being charged with much more easily. And it is no real problem for the city for me to amend it from one charge to another. They're both municipal violations, but oftentimes defendants go away feeling that there was some fairness involved when the actual conduct is being cited for what they really did. So it would be very useful for me to have this.
So I think I talked about this last time. The only one I had a little bit of concern with is H. Everything else in here I see, it's measurable, right inside the actual issue or item itself. It's actionable, or, sorry, it's measurable. H leaves it more subjective to the person that's,
Right.
so
The-
that's, I guess that's the only concern I have, because then you're stuck back in the same thing that, well, that's subjective, and how do you
Right.
deal with that when you go to court? Wouldn't it be,
I would have to prove that it somehow would tend to
Yeah.
cause a disturbance, which is what actual disorderly conduct is. There's a whole laundry list of things that you can do that would be considered disorderly conduct, and it all ends with which would tend to create a disturbance. You don't have to have the actual disturbance being created. You have to be able to prove to the court that it's conduct like this would tend to cause, more times than not, a disturbance, and that's all I would have to prove. But
so
what's
then with that being said, though, do we really need this in here?
Yes, because, well, maybe I could give it to the chief, but in a nutshell, it would be something isn't necessarily going to fit one of those other paragraphs. It'd be something that somebody didn't think of when it was written, but it would fall under that last paragraph.
Yeah, the only reason I'm questioning it is because it sort of relates to that other duties as assigned you get in your job title, and then you get stuck washing the,
Well,
the urinals.
why don't we, since this is the second reading, why don't we move it to the third reading, and then we'll have a discussion at the third reading before the vote. That's acceptable.
Well, we have the chief here now, isn't
Yeah,
he?
that's why
Yeah.
we had the chief, so we could ask their
Well,
questions.
we also have an attorney that does the prosecution.
Well, if I can just kind of add to that, and, I did take that into consideration. I think that's probably the main reason I was asked to be here tonight to discuss this. I guess as far as, I understand, the concern about the vagueness in it, but, as Vicki said, there are some situations that that an officer, you take a look at it, and kind of a general rule is, and I think most people can attest to that, is if you look at it and it looks illegal, it probably is. It's just a matter of understanding the laws well enough and what you can apply if it's not clear cut. And maybe a good example would be,
Chief, could I interrupt and just say, as I look at this, I could see, I'm in a parking lot, pick any parking lot, and I'm doing donuts. Now,
Right.
none of the ones A through G, if I look at this, say I can't do donuts. I got, I can't squeal. The tires aren't squealing, the car is, fishtailing is doing this, but I'm saying, oh, my attorney's saying he wasn't fishtailing, he was doing circles, he was doing donuts. So then you could use the H, because I had the same concern that you have, Mike, but then you would be able, I guess the question to you, Vicki, then as an attorney, you would be able to feel confident in taking that officer's citation and prosecuting it in the court by saying he was doing these donuts all over the parking lot, so it was causing a disturbance to the neighborhood.
And just for clarification for the listening audience, donuts are called Cheerios nowadays?
Same deal.
Oh, addressing my age.
I guess we're too old, huh?
Ours have gotten
But it doesn't say
smaller.
Cheerios anywhere here either.
Well, actually, doesn't H also give you the right to, I mean, right now you said state statutes in a high school parking lot or over by Century, you're not really allowed to give out citations.
Right, well,
So, and that's what you're after here.
Right,
H
and
is
with
looking
Kim,
at-
it's really limited. If we could justify one of the three things, a hit and run, an OWI, or reckless operation, and the closest would be reckless operation, but the only way that we would really be able to prove that is if there are some people that are in the vicinity and of being subject to injury or danger. And if we have people that aren't right in the immediate vicinity and they're in the middle of the parking lot where there is no structure or property that's in any sort of, I guess, immediate danger, then our hands are tied. There's not much we could do. We could stop that vehicle, of course, have a talk with the individual, talk to somebody from the school, and ask if they would like us to issue maybe a no trespass ordinance for that person, let them know that they can't come in onto that particular property anymore. But other than that, we really don't have much without this ordinance.
Yeah, so H opens up, I mean, nothing on here addresses hydraulics on a car, sparks coming out the bottom, or whatever else, neon lights, I mean, whatever else you want to do to it. And so that's why you're asking for H. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I did think about the hydraulics. I haven't seen that here yet, but I mean, it's, I have seen that before where they're rolling down the road and moving their vehicles in every
Gotta
which
be able to
direction.
bounce,
Yeah, it looks great, but, yeah,
Yeah, but then
there's a
again,
proper
that's
place
still,
to do it.
that's subjective. Once again, that's a subjective thing. Some people think that's great. And it's
Well,
not
it
going
does.
to cause a disturbance.
Well, yeah,
so.
but if someone calls and
Starting to
says.
think
would-
you're a sea lawyer, Mike.
I would,
Well, there,
I would love to see that removed. I'd love to see H removed. That's my take on it. I just don't like it in there. Everything else is measurable.
I would have a
Per-
tendency to agree with that. I understand the whole point, and you don't want this long laundry list.
Yeah.
But then again, we're creating a law that's just so vague.
I don't think it's vague. I mean, I think that the law and the attorneys need something to work with. I mean, how about a car going down a residential street that's got a nitro tank in it, and it shoots out a flame 4 foot long
Exactly,
underneath there?
and then-
I mean, you can't cover everything. You can't be specific on everything that can happen. So you have to have some vehicle to address those different situations.
And also, if an officer wrote under that last section that that was what they were being cited for, there would have to be some basis that that conduct would tend to create a disturbance. If it's just, well, I don't like that conduct, well, I'll throw that one out. It'll never make it to court. So there's got to be something, some basis for me to make an argument for why that conduct would tend to cause a disturbance. And so the subjectivity comes out within the system. They can plead not guilty, they come and talk to me, I take a look at the strength of the case, and I decide before it goes further. And I don't have a problem with it. I work with subjective dealings all the time in municipal court because no law is perfect, unfortunately.
Well, and Chief, I want to thank you, because I think in the first reading, I'm the one that asked, I know growing up, imprudent speed was probably the one that officers gave out all the time for almost everything on here. And so I'd asked, so I appreciate you coming up and explaining it.
Yeah, and I like the idea of it. I think it gives you a good tool to do your job. I have a hard time with things that aren't measurable by everybody. Unless you can do it measurably, you have a way to measure your outcome, measure your results. It's just, once again, it's subjective, and I worry about people getting a raw deal because it's subjective and not something that's measurable
But
by
the,
a
but the
ordinance.
system exists for them if they feel they're getting a raw deal to plead not guilty and come and talk to me. And my goal in prosecuting isn't to make sure that everybody gets the book thrown at them to the fullest extent possible. That's not what the prosecutor's job is. The prosecutor is supposed to make sure justice is served. And I do take that seriously. Would it help for the next meeting, for the third reading, for me to bring in the state statute on disorderly conduct so that you can see how disorderly conduct with a motor vehicle kind of relates back to just plain disorderly conduct, and you can see how the state statute is written, and that's a statute that is tried and true in terms of what would tend to cause a disturbance, and you'll see that, well, gee, that looks kind of subjective too, but it works. And then if you still feel that way, you can always make an amendment to have that one taken out.
I would like to say that in all the years that I've worked on the council, in all the different times I've been on it, I think this is the first time I can sit here and really feel that our police department is seeing and understanding our young people. I've been very pleased with not only our chief, but also our officers, and I think I would be more concerned about H in other situations in the past, when we didn't have the staff we have now. I think with the staff we have now, I don't think you're going to get something written up that doesn't belong written up. And then, like you said, let's give it to our city attorney to, if she thinks for some reason it was unjustified, she can write it down. And the other thing is, we could pass it as it is, and if we find that H is causing a problem, we put it back on the table a year from now and get rid of H. But I think I'd rather have it left in there at this point, because people are very creative in what they do, and they know this exists, it's on the internet, you know, you can find it. Well, gee, I'll make sure I don't do A through G, I'll just do something that's not on here, and then they won't be able to do anything. So I guess I understand Mike's concerns, but I also understand that we have a really good police department right now, and one that cares about people.
Thank you.
So I don't feel as uncomfortable with it.
Thank you, Mrs. Frisch.
Thank you, Diane. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move ordinance 1144 to third reading. Brings us to item 8, recommendations for future agendas. Council? Staff? Okay, at this time, I entertain a motion to convene into closed session. Do I need a motion for that?
Yes.
I do, okay. So I'll entertain a
Vote on it.
motion to convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85 1G, conferring with legal counsel who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or likely to be involved, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851, paragraph C, compensation and performance evaluation data of employees over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. At that, did I get a second?
Make a motion, or do you need a motion?
I thought you had.
Okay, I'll make a motion to do
Second.
that.
Second. Call a roll, please.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Grundon?
Aye.
Mr. Kirkovich?